Story 1. When I turned 22, I landed a job in New York City. The problem was, I lived in Jersey, and making that trip every single day would be impossible. I had to move, but money was tight. Then I spotted a Craigslist ad for a bedroom in Hell's Kitchen at an amazing price. I couldn't pass it up. The next day, I took the train into the city to check out the place. The landlord showed me around, and while he seemed a bit awkward socially, that didn't bother me much. The catch was simple. I'd be sharing the space with another guy. The landlord described him as super quiet and keeps to himself, which sounded perfect. His name was Bren. The landlord knocked on Bren's door, asking if he wanted to come meet me. Complete silence. Maybe he's napping, the landlord suggested with a shrug. We headed to the living room, where I said I was definitely interested. I filled out the paperwork, and by the next day, I had the room. Moving day arrived. That following week, my dad helped me carry all my stuff into my new room. Here's what struck me as strange. During all the noise of moving furniture and boxes, Bren never once came out to say hello. We could hear him shuffling around in his room, so he was definitely there. It became pretty clear that this guy wasn't going to be the friendly type. After my dad left and I was officially on my own, I settled into bed with my laptop to watch some shows. That's when I heard Bren's door open and close. This seemed like the perfect chance to introduce myself. His first time leaving the room since I arrived. I got up from bed, but before I could even reach my door, the front door slammed shut. I stepped into the living room to find it completely empty. I had no idea what Bren's deal was, but we'd have to meet eventually. Right, I went back to my room, ate some instant noodles, and called it a night. I woke up to the sound of the front door closing again, but by footsteps. The old wooden floors creaked as someone walked closer and closer to my room, then stopped right outside my door. I sat up in bed and looked down at the crack beneath the door. 2 feet stood there, perfectly still in the light. Why was he just standing there like some kind of weirdo? I didn't dare say anything. I just waited, hoping he'd move along. My door didn't have a lock, and I was genuinely scared he might just walk in. Finally, after what felt like forever, he walked back to his room and shut the door. Sleep didn't come easily. All night long, I heard constant thumping sounds from his room. I had no clue what he could possibly be doing, and part of me wanted to go knock and tell him to quiet down, but I still hadn't even met the guy. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I drifted off. When morning came, Bren was already gone, probably at work. I spent most of the day getting groceries and picking up things I needed for the apartment. When I returned, I dumped all the shopping bags on the couch to take a breather. I made dinner and watched some shows on the couch while Bren stayed out. Later, I made a quick trip to the nearby store for toothpaste. When I got back, I noticed Bren's door was slightly open with the light on. Finally, I thought, my chance to hello. I walked over to his door, knocked twice, and pushed it open. What I found inside made my blood run cold, or rather, what I didn't find. The room was completely bare except for one plastic chair sitting in the corner, the kind you'd see in a school classroom. My heart started pounding, and my hands began to shake. I quickly turned off the light and shut the door. Maybe Bren was in the middle of moving out. I rushed to my room, locked the door, and sat on my bed as a terrible headache hit me. I grabbed my phone and decided to call the landlord to figure out what was happening. I dialed his number and put the phone to my ear. Suddenly, a loud ringing sound came from inside my closet. My heart, which was already racing, felt like it dropped into my stomach. The phone rang twice, then went to voicemail. I stood up, ready to open the closet, but then it hit me. If the phone rang twice before going to voicemail, that meant he had his phone with him and chose to decline my call. The horrible truth crashed over me. The landlord was hiding in my closet, and there probably never was any Bren. I ran to the bathroom, locked myself in, and called the police. They arrived quickly and searched the entire apartment with me. Sure enough, we found the landlord crammed under my bed. I tried to press charges for breaking and entering, and get out of my lease. But it turned out there was no real lease at all. This guy wasn't even a legitimate landlord. He didn't own the apartment. I never found out how he even got the keys in the first place. My dad came the next day to help me move everything back home. I found a new place the following week, but going through the whole moving process again was a nightmare. I knew from the start that the so-called landlord gave me bad feelings. But who could have imagined what would actually happen? I found an ad on a rental site for a shared apartment near the poultry farm where I worked. Since it was convenient and already had furniture, I decided to move in. All I needed to bring were my clothes and a small dresser. There was already a bed waiting for me in the spare room. The man renting the room to me was elderly, around 70, and his name was Ben. We had a casual week-to-week arrangement with no formal contract, but he was basically my roommate. He was very old school and traditional about how he ran the house. Since I'd never come from money, this setup was honestly a great deal for me. One night after an exhausting day at work, I collapsed into bed and fell asleep instantly, but suddenly, I woke to my bedroom door creaking open. Light streamed in from the hallway, and there stood the old man Ben, with his hand on the doorknob. In his deep, scratchy voice, he said, "Stay out of the basement." He claimed he knew I'd been down there. I defended myself, insisting I hadn't, because I genuinely had. He shut the door, and I heard his footsteps heading downstairs. I sat there thinking this guy must have some serious mental issues. The next day was my day off, and Ben took his beat-up old car down the road, probably to run errands. While I was alone, I found myself staring at the basement door. I knew it led to the basement, because I'd seen him go down there before. I decided to take just a quick peek downstairs, but it was completely dark down there. Normally, I would never have been curious about going down there, but his weird warning about staying out made me want to see what was so important. Since he wouldn't be home for a while, I decided to investigate. I found the light switch at the bottom of the stair. At first glance, it looked like a normal basement, but then I noticed a door in the corner. Behind that door was something I could never have imagined. The door was extremely difficult to open, because there was some kind of rubber seal underneath, probably to keep the horrible smell from spreading to the rest of the basement and house. The inside of that small room was absolutely horrifying. Blood stains covered the concrete floor. Black bags were stacked in the corner, long enough to contain bodies or body parts, and the smell, the overwhelming stench of decay and death. I had to fight not to throw up right there. I noticed a camera mounted in the top corner of the room, pointing down at some kind of work table. I quickly snapped a photo of the room and got out of there as fast as possible. I rushed upstairs to the spare bedroom and threw all my clothes into a garbage bag. That's when I heard the front door slam shut downstairs. I tried to act normal and called out a greeting from the upstairs hallway. He didn't respond. I heard him open the basement door and stomp downstairs. That was my signal to run. I sprinted to my car and drove away without looking back. I drove 15 miles straight to my brother's farm and showed him the picture. He called me an idiot for not contacting the sheriff immediately. I called emergency services and told them to bring a search warrant to Ben's address and check the basement before he could destroy the evidence. I made it clear that I was just a temporary tenant who stumbled across this horror. A few hours later, someone from the sheriff's department came to my brother's farm, asking for my identification and other details. I cooperated completely. They gave me incredible news that Ben had been arrested. He was trying to clear out evidence from his basement, but he wasn't fast enough. The deputies couldn't share details about exactly what they found in those bags or anything else. Probably weren't allowed to. They thanked me and left. My brother let me stay with him for a few weeks until I was ready to find another place. I definitely remember mine. I walked into my dorm, and there was my new roommate. He had pale skin, dark hair, glasses, and spoke with a slightly high-pitched voice. Nothing wrong with any of that, but he immediately struck me as the computer gaming type, which wasn't exactly someone I'd click with easily. From the moment I shook his hand and got the weakest handshake ever, I felt put off. I'll call him John for this story. I left the room to meet other kids on the floor and make as many friends as possible. I instantly connected with some of the other guys, way better than I did with John. That first night,
involved lots of unpacking and hanging around the room. So I tried to get to know John a bit. It wasn't that he was mean. He just didn't seem to know how to have a conversation. I'd ask him questions about himself and get one-word answers or responses that barely made sense. He even went to bed super early, turning off his lamp around 10 o'clock. Since no one had classes the next day, I found it pretty weird. I put in headphones and watched videos on my phone until midnight, then went to sleep. The next morning, a few guys from my floor and I went to the dining hall together. When I returned to my room, I noticed my duffel bag had been moved. I looked over at John, who was sitting on his bed. I went through my bag to see if anything was missing. I couldn't pinpoint what, but the bag felt lighter somehow. I directly accused John of going through my stuff, and he denied it with a surprisingly aggressive tone. But what could I do? I had no cameras in the room, so I couldn't prove anything. The next night, I invited John to come out with me and some other kids from the floor. He declined, saying he wanted to stay on top of his schoolwork. So I went out, and when I returned, John was already fast asleep. It was pretty late, so I went straight to bed too. It started raining heavily outside. There was a storm in the forecast. I woke up in the middle of the night to thunder crashing. I was too comfortable to roll over and look outside, but even with my eyes closed, I kept noticing constant flashing from what I assumed was lightning. It actually helped me fall back asleep. The next morning, I woke up to find my backpack open and moved. This time, I didn't confront John. Instead, I decided to stay awake that night and listen to what he was doing. After a long rainy day, bedtime came around. I stayed on my phone for a long time, listening to the rain against the window. Around 1 or 2 in the morning, I rolled onto my side and pretended to be asleep. I did this for quite a while. Eventually, I started noticing those flashes again. Wait, there was no thunder. I turned to my other side and saw John sitting straight up in his bed. I only caught a glimpse of him quickly lowering his arms as I rolled over. Suddenly, all those flashes made perfect sense. It wasn't lightning at all. He was taking pictures of me with his phone. I played dumb and asked what he was doing. He stuttered and said he couldn't sleep. The next day, I told the other guys on the floor about this and how strange John was overall. They said I should request a room change, and I completely agreed. When I went back to the room, John was actually gone for once. I couldn't believe it. His laptop was sitting on his bed, with the screen slightly open. I had to look. I was too curious. I opened the laptop and found myself on John's desktop, which was covered with folders, programs, and images. It was the messiest computer desktop I'd ever seen. I started opening random pictures on his desktop. Most were just weird, but then I got to the disturbing ones. Pictures of me. When I opened one, I realized it was a photo of me in bed, taken with a phone camera using the flash. He had saved every single picture he'd taken of me on his computer. He even had photos of the inside of my duffel bag and backpack. I recorded a video of the laptop screen, deleted every picture I could find from his computer, and closed it. I went straight to the housing office and showed them the video. I demanded a new roommate immediately. I don't know how the school punished John, but they told me I'd get a new room across campus the next day. However, on my final night with John, I couldn't sleep at all. I heard the springs under his mattress creak as he got up at some strange hour. Then complete silence. Silence until I heard a short, quiet breath come from directly above my bed. He was standing over me while I slept. I just knew it. But I was too terrified to turn around and look. Less than a minute later, I heard his mattress springs again, and the rest of the night was quiet. I was out first thing in the morning. My new roommate was like breathing fresh air. A completely normal guy. It's pretty disturbing, knowing that John probably still has all those pictures of me sleeping on his phone. I have no idea what his plan was with those photos. I don't know why he stood over my bed like that on the last night. I don't know why he went through my belongings. The guy was a complete creep, and I'm grateful I escaped when I did. She was struggling financially, so I understood the situation. Kathy introduced me to the woman on moving day. Her name was Betty, and she was around 60 years old. It felt strange, knowing my roommate could almost be my grandmother. Since Kathy was subletting the place, it came first. I just needed to bring my own bed and dresser. The strange behavior started on my second night there. I was watching TV in the living room when Betty's head suddenly appeared from behind the hallway wall. She stared at me with this intense look and started making these weird quiet sounds. "Betty, are you okay?" I asked. She just groaned and disappeared back into the hallway. I immediately called Kathy and asked if something was wrong with Betty. Kathy said she seemed fine as far as she knew, though she'd only met her a week earlier. When I described what Betty had just done, Kathy sounded surprised. The next day, I ran into Betty making eggs in the kitchen. She said good morning, and I asked if she was feeling alright the night before. She looked confused about what I was talking about. When I mentioned how she'd been staring at me and making those sounds, she claimed she had no memory of it at all. The only thing I could think of was some kind of mental breakdown. Skipping ahead through the regular day-to-day stuff, I was lying in bed on my laptop with the lights off when there was a knock at my bedroom door. I muted my laptop and heard the same moaning and groaning sounds from Betty again. Honestly, I was uncomfortable about going out there, but this confirmed that something was seriously wrong with this woman. She kept knocking and wouldn't stop, but my door was unlocked. If something was really wrong, I figured she'd just come in and moaning and panied for what felt like a full minute before I heard her walk away. It seemed like these weird episodes only happened at night. I almost wished I could lock my door, because it was genuinely creepy. But there was no lock. Since she left, I was able to go back to sleep. I woke up expecting it to be around 9 in the morning, but everything was pitch black. I checked my clock. 1:30 a.m. What woke me up became clear when I heard a floorboard creak inside my room. I saw a figure standing at the foot of my bed in the darkness. "Betty?" I whispered. I heard those familiar groaning sounds again. I flipped on the lamp next to my bed, and there she was. The 60-something woman with her long gray hair, all messy, looking like she was half asleep and completely out of it. But the first thing I noticed was the large kitchen knife in her hand. I let out a terrifying scream as I curled up in the corner of my bed, expecting her to attack me or do something horrible. But she just kept making those strange sounds, then left the room. I ran to shut the door and pushed my dresser against it to block. I tried calling Kathy, but she was obviously asleep. I had to survive the night somehow. It was a long 6 hours before sunrise. I called Kathy at 8 a.m. and explained everything, telling her she needed to get Betty out immediately. She couldn't believe it, but apologized and said she'd come over that day. When Kathy came to talk to Betty, she explained that she couldn't just kick her out right away without proper notice, and the eviction process takes months. So Kathy told me it would be best if I just left the apartment and found somewhere else while she dealt with Betty. Betty apologized and claimed she had no memory of any of it happening. After Kathy and I did some research, we figured out that Betty most likely had a severe case of sundowning syndrome, which makes people confused or aggressive late in the day when the sun goes down. It's absolutely terrifying knowing that in whatever confused state she was in, she probably intended to come into my room and stab me for some reason.